Oh joy, my internet connection is unstable. Welcome back to the 90s and Tinderbox Meetup with Michael Becker. I'm Mark Bernstein and I'm the developer of Tinderbox. It's Saturday, July 5th, and without further delay, while I try to figure out a solution to my internet, here's Michael Becker.
Hey,
Good luck
everybody.
with that, Mark.
Welcome to our first July Tinderbox meetup. I hope for those in the United States, they had a nice, relaxing 4th. So what we typically do is we go around the room and new people introduce themselves. We then will talk about a theme, if we have one, which we don't today. And then otherwise, we generally go around and talk about projects. So that's what we'll be doing in today's discussion, is more of a spontaneous ad hoc conversation about tools for thought and knowledge management and the different projects we all individually might be working on. So with that in mind, and if we don't have, and if that kind of slows down, then I will come up with some exercise that we can all go through and play with. But having said that, let's go ahead and kick off the conversation. So Mr. Eddie.
Lower hand. So I'm with a little prompting from Win Treese, hopefully he'll show up. I'm restarting an effort to do research on why there is so little cross-fertilization, professional cross-fertilization between the world of librarians and the world of software.
Okay, so talk to us about that. That's interesting.
Have you ever encountered, I mean, basically I started, that's what you jumped into the middle with Steve. He was a willing victim and jumped to the bait. And can you still hear Michael? Mark can hear. Oh, you like this topic? Yeah, so I was accusing Mark, since you weren't in, it was only Steve and I. We have more. I see a fundamental drive of Tinderbox is to put the power of librarians into individuals' hands. And the people who show up here have their own little personal projects, pet whatevers. And how do you organize all these little scraps of paper of notes? And
so yeah, maybe you can start, like, let's start with defining the two most important terms of your thought exercise: librarian and software engineer. Like, what does a librarian do? What does a software engineer do? And
first off, I absolutely totally bristle at the use of the word software engineer. To the best of my knowledge, there is no such thing. Unless you're writing sort routines.
Software. Okay. Software developer, you said.
Yeah, software developer of all stripes. Analysts, business analysts are software developers.
Okay.
Because they're allegedly scoping out the problem that the programmer downstream is going to express in code, working code.
So on that note, then let's start with you. If you can walk us through an exercise of defining those two groups that need to work together. What is a librarian and what is a software developer? Can you give examples? And then let's give Peter a chance to chime in. Peter.
No, go ahead, Peter.
Okay. I think it's an issue of the libraries themselves being institutions. So librarians are actually not really in the loop for software selection for the software used in libraries. It's actually library system administrators who are making those decisions based upon what they think librarians need to be using. My library system for years had a catalog that they were relatively happy with, but the library system administrators decided that they wanted to switch to a new system because the billing model of the company supplying the library software changed to make it too high for them to be able to handle on their budget. Then they went scrambling for an open source OPAC system that they could install instead. They put it in, and for the next year after that, the librarians were tearing their hair out, going in sheer madness, until eventually the open source community that was driving that system was able to beat it into a usable form. But the librarians had no role or connection to that decision as to the jump between library software packages.
And
it was just pure bureaucratic nightmare.
Right. That's typical, totally typical. So my thing is there's two people, two active players in this use case. I'm the summer intern, new hire, newbie, whether or not I'm a programmer or not, who really knows? And let's see, Mark Bernstein is the super busy. He's not here. He can't defend himself. All the better. So I'll pick on Steve. And so Steve is the super busy project manager because he's good at juggling a bunch of stuff. And his boss, Steve's boss on scene that I'm not allowed to know, not talk to. If I'm in the elevator with Steve's boss, I should remain silent. Steve's boss has dumped a project on his desk. And because I'm available and my billing rate fits in the project, Steve dumps it on me. Steve not involved in my hiring, so has absolutely no idea what my skill set is or is not. And it's my job to try to figure out what the hell's going on. And I'm, kind of terrified. I don't want to admit how little I know because I'm 20 years old, 25 years old, and thrilled to have this wonderful job at some big name company, Arthur Anderson. Right? Did you ever take advantage of Steve? Do you ever take advantage of the newbies? Summer new.
It says, David, as the moderator of the discussion, let me stop you right there, though.
Okay, is that enough to go on?
No, not necessarily, because I think, well, I want to stop you for two reasons. One, we neglected to make a big, really important announcement, and I want to get that in at the beginning before we continue on in the conversation. And then I want to come back and challenge a little bit about what you're discussing. But in regards to the big, really important announcement, I suspect Mr. Bernstein, can you talk to us about SummerFest?
Certainly. About this time every year, a bunch of us small software developers in the Macintosh world get together and have this co-promotion thing called the Festival Artisanal Software, where you'll find about 20 really interesting titles on sale for really excellent, in Tinderbox's case, best of the year, but still sensible discounts. There's been a tendency in the software world, dying out, thank goodness, to offer huge bundles of software for pennies on the dollar, which is not sustainable and leaves the small developers holding the support costs and the promoters with all the money. But this is a sustainable model. It's been going on pretty much this basis for a decade or so. So definitely check out these tools. I have used almost all of them. The exception is one that's just out and is a really interesting tool for accessing your photo collections using onboard local AI, which is really promising because it is a problem. It's the last one in that row, Find My Snap.
Okay.
But it's also by the Peak 2 people. The Peak 2 people with the media manager won a nice prize earlier for user interface design. But these are really serious pieces of work, and certainly check them out. For the cost of even the most expensive, a occasional use or two will repay your time if you're doing serious work. And if you're watching this, you're doing serious work. So it's at artisanalsoftwarefestival.com. We will put the link in the chat.
Yeah, I already did. And we've obviously Tinderbox is in there. Your new book is in there. And then my whole library of courses are and courses and modules and such are in there as well. So cool. Thank you for that, Mark. All right, now David, let's go back to you and then we'll let others chime in on their topics. But you started getting down a path of operational resource alignment and how that can get confusing. And I think where you were kind of going with that is the corporate beast that is can often be the case. They grab the least costly, most available resource, whether or not that resource is up for the stage of the job, blah, blah, blah. But that is a totally different dialogue than the connection between a librarian and a software developer. And your initial claim in that somehow these two disciplines should be meeting. So can
Well,
you?
I'd be more interested in the librarian world, which I've asked for 35 years, has no interest. As Peter,
But before you go, let's go. Just please answer my question. What's a librarian and what's a software developer? And let's like understand those two concepts first before we have to talk about how or why they must meet.
a librarian is someone who organizes a collection,
Okay.
be it books, artwork, whatever. And
Okay. And so with that in mind, like for example, in the context of my doing my work with Tinderbox, I'm performing librarian like functions when I'm organizing my work in Tinderbox.
absolutely, absolutely.
Right. So you don't have to be the, and again, this is totally stereotypical. The nice old, the nice manner lady at the desk in the library store, like what Peter was referring, actually in the physical library, saying, "Can you go help me find that reference?" It's not just that; it's anybody, in some respects, that's performing the discipline of.
Yes, and I would argue that we are all librarians. Anybody who depends on the technology in their hand on their desk is a librarian.
Okay, so and say it again. Someone that's organizing something. Just say it again.
Organizing a collection. To the best of my knowledge, librarians do not refer to libraries. They do not manage libraries. They manage collections.
Okay.
Of stuff.
Okay, and that organization then includes the process of categorization and ontologies and terminologies and storage and all of the disciplines for doing that thing we call organization.
Yes, and this goes back. Speak, Steve.
Is curating, meaning in part getting rid of stuff that is duplicate or not relevant, also part of the librarian function?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So curating and culling are also part of the librarian function. Okay.
Yeah. And shifting over to the world of software, building software, there are lots and lots and lots of little itty bitty pieces in software, down to the functions, the routines that you, Michael, spin off so elegantly in these demonstrations. Frederick.
Sorry. Yeah, I would argue a librarian also does help with discovery, where, for example, a good research librarian would know the field and know about materials and where to go and what to find and understand the topic. So it's not just collecting stuff and telling you where it is, but actually having some understanding and helping you figure things out.
Well, and possibly that could be a sub, using David's language, that it's a subcategory into the broader bucket called organization. Like in order to organize, you also need to be able to discover within that collection.
What do you have? What don't you have that you should have? Peter.
Peter. Talking with the microphone muted, as always. One of the things that's always irked me about collection decisions is how the librarians fail to tap into the expertise of their end user populations. So, for instance, one of my public library had an absolutely wonderful monograph on Egyptian hieroglyphics. And one day I went to borrow it, and it wasn't there anymore. And I found out that they got rid of this thing. And as it turns out, it was actually a rare document. It cannot be found anyplace. You can't even find accurate bibliographic information on it, because when they purged the item from the collection, they also purged the bibliographic record from their database. So I said, okay, I understand you got rid of it, but can you give me the bibliographic information so we can order that through interlibrary loan? And they said, well, no, once we got rid of it from the collection, we wiped out all knowledge of its existence. And I was just in a state of utter disbelief. Why is there no mechanism so that I can put, here's what I'd call it. I'd add a feature to the library catalog called terminal hold. And it would just be a way for me as a user to say, if you ever decide to throw this bloody thing out, let me buy it from you so that I can move it into my collection and we don't lose it forever. But the notion of letting end users opine on the quality of resources in the library is just anathema to library school think. You know, you're not qualified, even though you're an expert in the field, or at least someone who's been researching in this particular subfield that I might never have looked at before. But I went to library school, so I can tell you that you're not going to need that book, and I can get rid of it forever. And don't tell me otherwise, because you're not qualified to tell me.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting. And in your two examples, you garnered, at least for me, Peter, this vision of the physical library. And I think partly what David's trying to suggest is concept of librarian can be much more than that. And I also think there's some interesting, not that I wouldn't necessarily want to get into this too much in today's call, political and social cultural ramifications that come into this discussion as well, such as when one's personal, social, religious beliefs influence what is and what is not out of a particular collection. And then just a little nod to the guys over at the Internet Archive and such. I mean, talk about a library. They're doing unbelievably important things, not just digitally as well. When I met the team there, I'm trying to get their founder to speak one day in our group, but they've actually bought several warehouses, physical warehouses, a couple locations in the U.S. and in Europe, where they're actually, to your Peter's point, they're collecting the books that no one wants, so that this world and the human knowledge collection doesn't go away. So, but Peter, you were having a comment?
Oh yeah, another horror story.
Peter, don't bring it. Just put check the passion at the door.
Okay. We had a cookbook from the Revolutionary War period in my local library, and I'd mentioned to the librarian, big mistake, that some of the recipes called for cooking with some herbs, which have been shown can lead to unwanted ends of termination of pregnancies. So the herb in a couple of the recipes was not safe. You'd want it. And I said, can we put a little annotation here on the book that said, the recipe on page 14, if you're pregnant, you don't want to cook with that, because that herb's been shown to cause miscarriages during a pregnancy. And the librarian's response was, of course, they had to get rid of the book completely, because they couldn't attach an addendum to the book warning people that the one recipe in the book has been shown to not be a healthy thing to eat. No, the entire cookbook had to go with all of the recipes. I mean, at least put in a locked special collection room with a note on it. But again, I'm not a physician, so I couldn't opine on the safety of the recipe beyond bringing to their attention that there might be an issue with the recipe. And of course, their conclusion, out of an abundance of caution, was we'll just pull the book and get rid of it completely. So now that collection of recipes from the colonial period, which would be really fascinating to anyone studying the history of the period from a culinary perspective, isn't available anymore, because there was no medium between either we keep it or we throw it out, but no way to say there's a problem with something on a certain page in the book, let's add a note to it, because you can't add to the document to remedy something that's wrong with it.
So you're on mute, Michael. And Mark has been grinning under his hand there. So clearly I've stepped on a carbuncle a long.
Yeah, Mr.
Okay,
Bursky,
Mark.
Let's let Mark has put some comments in the chat. Mark, do you mind coming off mute and talking to us about those? You're still on mute.
No, still on mute.
Still on mute. Still on mute. Mark, you're on mute.
How about now?
Now.
Am I there yet?
Good.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Yes, here we go. I agree that librarians are lovely people, and I've known a couple of delightful librarians socially. I actually spent a lot of time from various parts of my life in libraries. And while I like libraries, I haven't found librarians in those libraries particularly helpful. Uh, I gave a talk at the American Library Association many years ago, in which I pointed out that the real problem is that the librarian's first duty is to protect the books. And that often means protecting the books from the people who might read them. Peter's comment about the problem of abortifacients and cookbooks is a real problem. And, on this, though, I think in general, the U.S. Community of libraries and librarians has stood up very well to a prolonged and fascist assault to try to purge libraries of everything that doesn't align with Christian nationalism. And library advocacy of privacy is a really big deal, and we owe them a certain amount of gratitude for that. And for Peter, though I imagine the trauma of the Lost Hieroglyphics book is fairly long ago, right now, if the book was in English, it is likely to be listed in the Library of Congress. Looking stuff up in the Library of Congress itself was a pain in the neck back in the days when you had to go to a good research library and haul around those heavy volumes. But Bookends will do it for you. And Bookends is conveniently part of the artisanal software festival we were talking about before.
And again, I think you raised an interesting role. Going back to David's broader definition, it's the person with the title, and also his corporate example, the person with the title may not necessarily be the most effective in the functions that need to be done in that context. In the context, the definition David has given us is this organization of a collection. And basically going back to your claim, David, what I'm hearing you say is there is an opportunity for the software developer community to possibly benefit from the long history of librarian collection insights.
Yes.
Presumably, librarians could benefit those that assemble collections could benefit from understanding software better.
Yes.
Or the software development process better. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
And because I mean, I have yet to encounter anybody close to the software involved in the making of software. I make a difference between the use of software and the making of software. Tinderbox is obviously a making of software exercise for the people that show up here. That's uncomfortable to you, Mark?
I think when you talk about using it, you're on mute again, Mark.
I'm not frowning about that. I'm frowning about something else. Pay no attention.
You're having a love affair with your internet provider, your signal.
Yeah, but honestly, David, though, I'd suggest we're doing both here. We're talking about both the creation collection and use of it. That's
because professionally, I mean, we're coming up on a huge problem where I'm wearing my professional hat. In the world of the IBM mainframe, I mean, the people that understand these software libraries, where the names in my world of just the IBM mainframe are very often 8 characters long.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not long names or short names are more useful I'm waiting for somebody to do some research. I would probably argue that short names are more effective than long names, because if you use long names like we can do now, you have too many choices, and you can use words that I don't recognize that word. I'm not interested. But we're coming up basically the diminishing people, the career people who are retiring, accelerated recently in the federal government. They're the people that keep these systems running. And I've just never found, I've looked and looked and looked, ask librarians, so we desperately need the skills of catalog librarians to identify this thing, this thingy, be it a schema, be it a button, be it a piece of logic, so that A, we don't lose it, Peter, and B, when someone else comes along, they are pointed to, you don't have to make this thing up. Just because you only understand zip code, do not make up postal code as a new thing. It is not. And if you haven't had a conversation with a geographically challenged American that thinks postal code is different than zip code, you haven't lived yet. But anyway, rant.
Yeah. Okay. So
that's all. I mean,
yeah. So that's an interesting. I mean, a couple things that come out of this dialogue. One, I don't necessarily know if I disagree with you. I think it's an interesting view or lens, but I also think it's important based on the threads in the past that this conversation's taken. That as much as you have helped opine over the years in these dialogues, understanding terminology in the context of the conversation one is having is brutally important. And understanding that term, again, if we had the same conversation next week, starting with what do we mean by this term is really important. And so understanding terms, essentially understanding the what's, and then talking about the whys, and then teasing out those hows, always keeping in context, I think is a really important skill set for all of us to learn as we're either verbally having these conversations or digitally having these conversations as we're using our various tools. So I appreciate how this methodology transgressed. And just give you an important, let me total side a note aside.
No tangents, Michael. No tangents.
No, but it's somewhat of an anecdotal comment. So I've been doing a lot of indoor climbing as of late. I climb a couple days a week now, and my son got me into it. And I had a really, really scary thing happen to me about 10 days ago. As I met a random guy at the front desk, and they paired me up with him to be able to climb together. And by our first climb went okay. Second climb was a little sketchy. He clearly didn't know what he was doing. And the third climb, he dropped me, and I fell 20 feet and hit the ground. And that really freaked me out, obviously, and it was terrible. And it was one all around skills. And then the following week, I could have died. I mean, it wasn't pretty. But following week, I was climbing again, getting back on the horse, and I got hooked up with yet another person, but somebody else vouched for them and said that they were really good and knew what they were doing. And I'm about 60 feet up the ground, and I yell the word take, which is the common term for like take rope, tighten up the rope. I'm about to fall. And she wasn't doing it. And I finally get down there, and I'm like, why weren't you taking up the rope? And she's like, oh, I have no idea what that word meant. And yet that is what we learn when we're climbing. And so to your point now, if I'm going to climb with someone new, I rattle off, here are the terms that we're going to use to communicate while I'm up on this wall, because you could kill me if you don't do it right. So, and I do that every time now. So there are certain instances where I think, and that one is an example, terminology is incredibly important, and one should not assume the other one understands what we mean by it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is, librarians will talk about controlled vocabularies.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah, but the point being too is, and this is where I think we can get a bit off as well. Context is everything. No one word will rule all for everyone worldwide at all times. And so it doesn't matter if the word is take. Maybe the word is rope. Maybe the word, in my context, it's just as long as your partner or partners that you're working with all agree what the word is. And your team and your group need to have that agreement of what that word is. It doesn't necessarily require then everybody to agree on those use of the terms, unless you're doing what Cory Doctorow often will talk about. And actually, I don't know, I'll find the article, but Cory Doctorow has this wonderful piece where he talks about the idea of interoperability. And he essentially says there are 3 forms of interoperability. And in software language, interoperability is the ability for 2 computing systems to communicate with. And in order for them to communicate and exchange data streams together, they need to be using the same terminology, or at least have means to map them. And he says the first stage, or the broadest stage of interoperability, is standards, where we've all come together collectively and established a standard and maintained that standard and agreed to that standard. Standards are inherently, by their nature, slow, expensive, somewhat restrictive. They have a lot of issues, but yet they are what makes the world thrive and survive. The next level is, and I don't remember the term that he had. I'll find it and I'll put it in the chat. But it was something to the effect of mutual contractual agreement, where a small group of people to get together, not the bully pulpit community that says we're going to do a standard, much like the IETF or WC3 for the internet. The smaller group is a small collection of people or companies that get together to set up an agreement that they will work together. And much like what Mark Bernstein does with Tinderbox, he gives a call out to the founder over at Bookends and says, let's get our 2 tools working together. And the 2 of them figure out a way of doing that. And so that's not a standard. It's a standard between them. It's a methodology that they've agreed to do between them, but that's not necessarily, and they might be leveraging standards to do that or aligning their work together to do that. But at the end of the day, they're figuring it out. And then the third bucket he talks about is adversarial interoperability. And adversarial interoperability is, I'm just going to re-engineer, back engineer, figure out how to work on top of your system, whether or not you like it or not. And he says, in order for societies to thrive, we need all 3, but we really need the third, because that's what often will drive a lot of evolution and revolution and allow us to keep the pace of change. So again, I'm really curious on like how we, and I just love his work, how, so your terminology and your methods, David, on understanding that, that's another kind of mapping. And I'll shut up now, but that was my thinking that this time as you were talking. People have any thoughts, reactions on that? Peter, you got your hand up.
Yeah, just going back to Mark's earlier point about librarians and privacy. This was another edge case I ran into a few years back. I went to the library before they switched catalogs and said, there was a book I had out 6 months ago on the subject, and I don't remember what the title was, and I can't lay my hands on. Could you check my record and tell me what that book was? And they said, no, in order to protect your privacy, we flush all of your records the second you return a book. So if an FBI agent arrives with a subpoena, that record will no longer be present in the system. So we won't be violating the subpoena when we tell them that we can't tell them what you were reading. I said, wonderful, but can you have the catalog save my records, because I'm not doing anything. I care about the FBI being able to know that I'm reading these books, just academic research. And for my own convenience, I'd like to be able to have a record of what I've personally taken out before so I can go back and see it. And it was just anathema to them. However, when those library administrators switched to the open source catalog, suddenly, lo and behold, new functionality arrives by default. Everyone's record back to the inception of the new software system is available as a downloadable spreadsheet in the system, because the people that developed the new system had no connection whatsoever to the librarianship tradition of not keeping the records so that they couldn't be potentially findable through legal action. So then I asked, well, is there any way that I could remove one item from the record, which of course there was no functionality to do. So instead of being able to have everything unavailable by default, then everything toggled to being available by default with no way to purge it.
Well, and again, this is where
the mind.
But this yes and no though. But so here's the issue. What you're essentially asking that software company to do is to, take on all of liabilities and take on a lot of expense, and to maintain functionality for you without you having to necessarily pay for it. Or even if you do pay for it, you're not going to want to pay for it with, with that would to truly cover all of those necessary experiences and our expenses and such. And honestly, this is where my doctoral research comes into play, and the transition or the shift that's happening in society right now is as we are migrating data from the centralized servers in in companies, whether or not that data is in the cloud or not, to the edge into individuals' what's called a personal data wallet or personal data store. And I was talking to somebody actually in the Google legal compliance department last week. And interestingly enough, one anecdotal comment he made is Google recently has stopped storing people's location on their servers and storing location history on the edge on the individual's device to accomplish exactly what Peter was saying, in that they don't want to be accountable now and have to and be able to respond to the subpoena from say legal body. And again, a widely simplifying a 5-minute discussion I had. So, but the general gist is it's a way to decentralize the data centralize the data into the hands of the individual, giving the individual more sovereign agency and control of their data, reducing Google's liability. But more importantly, and this is what really triggered my interest in his comment, was the anecdotal follow-up comment he made, though, is that we weren't really doing it because of the compliance reasons or because of the privacy reasons. What we were doing it for is we needed to get all of this data off of our servers and off of our compute, because the AI modeling engines are a lot more profitable. And so if they're essentially moving the non-profitable data management off of Google servers, getting it onto the endpoint of the individual, which is benefiting privacy and compliance, but also creating new, more profitable revenue streams for Google's existing compute infrastructure, which I found fascinating.
Many, many, many topics there. Boy.
All right. So anybody else have their hand up at some point? I think
I mean, again, having to, these weekly meetings, people have their own collections and hobbies of stuff that they're trying to organize. And no one here, to my knowledge, other than maybe Mark, but it's more frustration. No one here can raise their hand to say, "Oh, in my prior profession, my dealing with software, I never had any education or training on how to organize stuff. It was purely on the job." Right, Mark? Yep. And it's and I deal with the biggest of big mainframe places, and they lose stuff because they don't. It's just human nature that if something works, you forget about it. 5 or 10 years later, someone makes a small change and something breaks, and then they got to figure out what piece of software is related to another piece of software. And so that's the librarians. To do this in after the fact is very, very slow and difficult. Trying to make it, put the process down on the iPhone, basically, where that original note originates, on the phone or on your laptop or desktop, and have David, that librarian, that catalog librarian, not the reference librarian, the catalog librarian looking over your shoulder and saying, "Oh, by the way, we already have one of these. Look over there."
Hey, David, I think we need some therapy on that. What do you charge for therapy?
If you have to ask, you can't afford it. Okay. The background.
David, I have to interject on that. It made me laugh. So there was in Japan, when I was 21, I was living in Japan, and one of my friends I wanted to go out with her, and she's like, "Don't bother, I'm too expensive for you." So, so it's like one of those things. It was great, and I'm like, and we stayed friends forever. So I'm like, well, thank you, I appreciate it.
Well, setting the context up front.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I mean, then this AI thing. Oh God. So I mean, just tidbits. I grew up in a house with 10,000 books. That was as of that we broke the house up in 1969 or 1970. So prior to that, at one point we threw out 10,000 pounds of newspapers. I held in my hands a Virgin Wall Street Journal from the day I was born. And I fretted, keep, dump, keep, dump. I threw it away. Now I wish I'd kept it, but whatever. And I did the research for my undergraduate history thesis in the Library of Congress. If I tried today to drive and park on East Capitol Street, by the time I was out of the car, I assume I'd be face down and handcuffed with my hands behind me. And so chasing down stuff that other people have created and I find of interest is just an inherent part of life. And the fact that Tinderbox is literally a personal central repository, but then how to push the discipline out to, when I travel with, 3x5 cards in my pocket. So if I have a brain fart sometime, I'm gonna write that down.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, maybe, it will migrate to Tinderbox. So anyway.
Yeah.
To be resolved. I mean, it's all kinds of issues of, I mean, the FBI, the Patriot Act of the FBI showing up and say, oh, we want Michael Becker's your records. We want Michael Becker's records off that disk. And of course, what they walk away with is the entire contents of the disk. Everybody else. That's what the Patriot Act does. But anyway, that's enough of a rant for me. Anyway,
awesome. All right,
to be continued.
No, it's a great dialogue. And again, as I said earlier, what I appreciate about it is not just the nature of the content of the discussion, but the framework of the discussion as well. And in some ways, I think the framework is more important than the content. Through certain lenses. So to the extent that one can use the framework then to interrogate the problem, then that I find that really helpful. And then honestly, a total aside, and I think I mentioned this before too, but to give you an example of a framework was Buddha's Four Noble Truths, where Buddha says, life is suffering, we're all suffering. That suffering is caused by desire. That we can identify the root cause of that, or we can identify solutions to the suffering. That's the third noble truth, and the fourth noble truth is the solution is the eightfold path. And if you strip away any of the kind of Buddhist motif and whatever you call it, religious or spiritual connotations or language, really what that framework says, and again, if you want to look it up, it's Buddha's Four Noble Truths. What Buddha gave us in that time was or whomever, if we're attributing that history to the Buddha. I mean, who knows? Was a universal problem-solving framework, which essentially says the first truth is to identify a problem and label it. In his context, it was this idea of suffering. The second truth is to identify, or to the best of your ability, what the root cause of that is, and to keep interrogating that down to the point where you find a root cause. The third truth is to have faith or trust that you can actually address that root cause. You can mitigate or actually eliminate, in the case of Buddha's model, the harms that are being caused by that. And then the fourth one is to provide a framework to actually execute that third truth. And so I just find that that very interesting, that how important that the idea of having a framework can be for leadership and solving and addressing issues. Yeah.
And you have now addressed this in your climbing, in that you run a partner through a vocabulary test.
Every freaking time now, because he almost killed me. Yeah, I mean, that was, I still shudder a little bit. I came inches away from breaking my neck, but yeah. Kim, you were reacting while I was talking. What's your thoughts on that?
No, just the looking at right now, just doing some searches on the Buddha, the Four Noble Truths, and the applicability of how to use that without the religious context. That's good. I mean, there's some things that we could use as a framework to start a conversation. Amen to that. That's
and I actually with Dawn, I was meditating one day, and what dawned on me during that meditation is I was trying to apply that Four Noble Truths to my cybersecurity work, and I played with it, and that's when I came up with this concept called the fivefold path to digital sovereignty, which is a riff off of Buddha's eightfold path to enlightenment. And and it really just comes around the fact of we need to be aware of what's happening, we need to identify root causes, we need to have faith and accept that we can in fact address them and solve them, and then follow a framework to solve them. So I imparted upon all of us, especially in context of Tinderbox, because let's bring it back to our conversation here. It behooves us, in each and every one of us, to develop our own set of noble truths when we're using a tool like Tinderbox. And at the end of the day, our truths are our truths and no one else's. And they very well may have similarities in terminology and methods and all that with everybody else's. And part of the reason why we come together is to find alignment and efficiencies between each other's methods and using a tool. But my experience in using Tinderbox is, it really then becomes a very, very personal path. At the end of the day, when you sit down to actually do the work for yourself and or whomever you're serving with the tool that you're doing as you're doing it. And then that's why in Buddhism, the second conversation we have there is what's called the three jewels. And the three jewels are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And the Buddha is the teacher, the Dharma is the teachings, and the Sangha is the community. And and according to Buddhist lore, it's very difficult to reach enlightenment without all three. And so, in many ways, our teachings in the language and our rhetoric is the things we read and learn. This is the community. And and each of us are our individual teachers or respective thereof. So I find some amazing parallels as I think about these different concepts. All right, anybody other thoughts, ideas, reactions that people want to talk about? More coffee? All right. So Mr. Bernstein, Mr. Bernstein's off to go get some more coffee. I was going to do that too.
Can Mark's ebook be physically printed on paper?
I don't know. We'll ask him when he gets back. You can. I believe he's got a hard copy that you can buy up on Amazon now.
Oh, really?
Or he's working on getting a hard copy. It's either there already or not. We'll ask him when he gets back.
When I looked at it was only ebook on offer. It was at the SummerFest is when I last looked.
Got it. So I think a hard copy is in the works. All right. Okay. So who else has any other thoughts, comments, anything you want to discuss today? If not, we can come up with some ad hoc exercise to play around with the Tinderbox tool, because that's always fun.
I really wish the library catalogs had the flexibility of Tinderbox. You have no end-user customization capability in any of these big data systems that are run by institutions.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes down to just complexity and liability, right?
I had a question. This is Frederick. So you're offering this course and you have it on demand. Does that mean you can't ask any questions during the course, or how does that work?
Which course are you referring to? My 5 C's course?
Yeah, the 5 C's.
Yeah, no, you can email me. You can email me questions. It's pretty flexible. You email me questions, I respond. The only issue is I don't want to get 50 questions a day. But But yeah, no, do we, you have, asynchronous support through email.
And how rigorous is the need to keep up with the schedule if you're on demand? Because the live ones, you have a certain cadence. Do you expect
I
to
mean, it's up to you. Every session is recorded, and you can always access the material and watch it later. And you'll have access to it in perpetuity.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you'll get a hell of a lot out of it. Peter.
Yeah, I'm wondering, has anyone tried to use Tinderbox via AppleScript to execute a library catalog search with bookends and then automatically just pull the results directly into Tinderbox?
I'm
So
sure
Tinderbox driving bookends to run a search of World Cats.
I'm sure somebody has, but I'm also sure not anybody on this call. If I recall, we don't have a lot of AppleScript developers here. And why would you want to do that, Peter?
At the deciding what resources to pull through interlibrary loan stage of a research project would make more sense for them to live in Tinderbox than it would for them to live inside of bookends.
Got it. Okay. No, I don't know. I'm not familiar with that one. All right. Anybody else? Okay. What kind of exercise might you like doing? I was thinking one that just popped out of my head is you've all seen me do it before, the automatic affirmation tool or utility I do. So when an action is taken, you can give yourself an attribution and have Tinderbox speak to you and say great job. I thought we could brush off some of that. And the skills that we would learn from that is leveraging the voice capabilities of Tinderbox, attribute values, pulling in feeds, and we could build that. We got about a good 30 minutes left. We could take that 30 minutes and build a little module out of that. And we could share with that if anybody would be interested in that. Yeah, David, you're waving your hand. You're on mute. Can't hear you.
I'm flexing it. Numbness. Age.
Got it. And Peter, you're saying, I think Zotero has a narrow edge of plunking references off the web pages. Yeah, what Peter's referring to. So in the chat, Peter is referring to the Zotero browser extension where you can click the browser extension button when you're on a web page, and Zotero will do its best job to add that to your local Zotero store collection. And that's personally what I do. Bookends doesn't have that type of utility, and I find that incredibly limiting. So while Bookends for me is the preeminent, best, most accurate, most efficient, reference manager, and and if you really need like that perfect picture reference, Bookends is the way to go. If you're more get it done, move quick in the context of the web, I find Zotero easier. So that's and Frederick, you're interesting. So you both hard to move records from Zotero to Bookends? No, it's not necessarily hard. It's just one of efficiencies and its effectiveness. I'm like, you could do that, but yet that's another set of tools and another activities, and adding in those workflows are good until they're unnecessary or needed. So unneeded. I find I get enough out of Zotero without needing the perfection of Bookends. And for those listening, it was Frederick asking a question about interesting. So you both you use both. So I do use both, but I tend to use Zotero significantly more just on a day-to-day basis. And then Mr. Bernstein's answering. Yeah, if you use the RI, and we can demonstrate that too if people are interested, but I believe Bookend supports this as well, but and this goes back to our Cory Doctorow discussion on that middle layer of interaction. Let me look up the article and find the word. There's the standards adversarial interoperability, and then the word in the middle that I want to find. But the point being is there's what's called an RIS format, which is an old standard, and Mark is integrated between Bookends and Tinderbox, and between Zotero and Tinderbox to pull in the RAS formatted data and then automatically populate the reference prototype when so if a data object being dragged onto Tinderbox has an RAS element in it, Tinderbox will automatically parse that RAS data into a reference prototype. And so that's a really beneficial thing. And we can demonstrate that really quick if people are interested.
That's great. I'm interested also in what you wanted to show before with the voice, though.
Attribution thing.
Yeah, that sounds cool, actually.
All right, so we can go. We can do both. That's the one nice thing is we can have two things that are true. So let's demonstrate at a very, very quick. And I hadn't planned any script for this, and I got to the desk 3 minutes before the dog walk, or after a dog walk, so it might take me a bit to get this organized. I got way too many screens on my thing. All right, so if we go up here, and let's say we have Zotero, and again, Bookends can do this as well. So here's my adversarial interoperability article on Cory Doctorow. And again, one of the things I find, and it can be super annoying, but it's also this methodology of being kind to your future self. So we often talk about this idea of incremental formalization, and we talk about this idea of or my framework of what I call the 5 C's of knowledge management. And the first step in the 5 C's of knowledge management is collection. The first C is collection. And in collection, part of what I talk about and what I've learned in the process, and again, going to terminology, collections is part of my Four Noble Truths and my framework. The term collection has a lot of deep meaning to it. But one of the key elements of that meaning is I've learned that if I take those extra few minutes at that point of collection to get at least the fundamental base data that I need to have a proper citation, it will save me hours. So 5 minutes now could save me hours if or even an infinite problem, because I never could find the source of the information before. So once you kind of break it down into the 5 steps, for me, collection, curation, creation, collaboration, contribution, once you kind of understand those steps and trust that the whole system can work together for you so that you ultimately can have a productive contribution, you'll learn that the extra 30 seconds or extra 5 minutes or extra 10 minutes to find that actual to get the citation right at that point of collection is just enormously valuable and worth an investment of time. And so what Peter was referring to here was this the browser extension for Zotero that you can install. And when I install that, you'll see here that Zotero has immediately dropped in the SummerFest. And then I can go ahead and give it a name. We'll say Bernstein. And this is a great example of taking that extra 30 seconds. If you just dropped in the hit the little magical button and just assumed it did everything right for you, you'll notice that it couldn't capture the name because the web page is not properly formatted the name. There's no metadata behind the web page to actually give Zotero a name to pick up, so you just type it in. So Bernstein, let's see, Bernstein Mark. Okay, and then you capture a date. So it was July 3rd, 2025. And so that's enough data for me to kind of initially capture what we needed to do. And you'll need, and Zotero works great with another tool called Better BibTech, which is a open source software tool that overlays onto Zotero to get you the citation key, which is really, really helpful. So that, so I've got the citation in, and now I can just drag that over into Tinderbox, and you'll see automatically something just happened. And this is that combination of that Cory Doctorow discussion of standards and that mid-level term, which I can't seem to find, and I don't want to read the article in front of you in real time. Here it is. Okay, I'll find a little bit more. Okay, so what happened was when we dragged that on, Tinderbox recognized that this element that I'm dragging over has some RIS data to it, and actually it would be interesting to export and how and why that worked is in Zotero when you go to preferences and you go to export. Come on.
We don't see the window.
Oh, sorry. When you go to Zotero and you go to export, oh, and did you see my, okay. You can tell it what the export format is. And so Zotero is going to be handing off by setting this export format to RAS. It is letting you hand off an RES formatted, much like a JSON structured document over to Tinderbox. Now you'll see here too, it says URI Roger A. So the RES format in Tinderbox is like a form of JavaScript type programming. And Roger Alexander in our community, going back to the Buddha Dharma Sangha, saw me struggling about 18 months ago and went into the code to help add in some lines so additional Zotero field elements could be passed over when I'm doing export. So if anybody's ever interested too, you can reach out to me and I can share with you the RAS library that Roger and I have been working on. So this RAS formatted document gets pulled over into Tinderbox, and you now have the note. You'll notice that Tinderbox automatically added the reference prototype. And so if we go to the outline, you'll see the reference prototype has been automatically added. And so this brings up another kind of concept that I think is important from your own truths in using Tinderbox. We have somewhat of a, there's another terminology is often used as conventions. There's standards, agreements, adversarial interoperability, conventions is another term. And as we've all talked about, like P term is, putting a P in front of your prototype is a really nice convention. Because that lets you, going back to our earlier discussion about ontologies and terminology, that helps us know that, okay, any item with a lowercase p on it is a prototype. And then that will help protect us from name collision and such as you're working on your projects. It's also really helpful to have that convention too, because in your mind, when you're writing your action code, it's really easy to kind of keep that convention in mind. However, having said all of that, the built-in prototype doesn't have that P, and I have chosen to break my convention of having a P in front of my prototypes because I like this automatical conversion when dragging over an RAS document. So I personally leave the reference person is another one I leave. I don't add a P in front of it to benefit from a similar drag and drop capability. Events is another example of that too. So in other words, leave the names of the built-in prototypes the way they are, and then for your own add a P. It's just going back to the standardization. So now what you've done here is you'll see Tinderbox has automatically populated a note and the reference related attributes in the system. And I still a reference rather than P reference. Yeah, that's good enough too. Mark. And so now what we've done, but if you look here, oops, do it again. There's an attribute called reference RAS, and this is the data that's being pulled over in that RAS file. And you'll see it's a pattern. And then you can use Tinderbox action code to parse that pattern out. And we can go back to old meetups. We don't need to do it right now. But you can parse that pattern out for bringing that in. And one of the custom items that Roger and I figured out how to bring over was this LB hyphen, which is the citation key. And so what you can do in your parsing and in your methodology is, so this LB hyphen is not part of the standard, or is a label that's not recognized within the standard Tinderbox extraction for RAS. So what we do here, and if we go down, go to prototypes, example, go to citation. Key, create a citation key attribute, and then you can create a simple stamp. And I've got a really, really complex, as one could expect, because I've been developing it over years, set of rules that I apply when an RAS document comes in, but we'll say reference parse. And we can say text. No, sorry. Citation key equals text dot following LB space hyphen space that. And so you can apply that, and you'll see, let's go here and we set that. So it didn't go like this. And did I do it wrong? Yeah, so there was an extra space in there. And there you go. And so you can set up action code to automatically, parse that extra custom attribute or value or parameter or property, whatever word you want to put to them. Every software application has slightly different ones. Nod to David Eddy in that statement. And you can then parse that out. And so then if you want to automatically do that, so if we go back to here, what we can do is go to our reference prototype, go here, let's go to rule and say, stamp. Okay, so there's a rule that will be running and stamping that. This is one of an infinite number of examples you could do to do that on a prototype. And then we want to go back and adjust our rule, because now we're not doing it from text. We're doing it from RAS reference RAS. Okay, and we'll show you one other optimization there. So now, if I delete this, next time we come back, it automatically gets parsed, because the rule's running behind the scenes, parsing out on the reference RAS data, and that's going to be constantly doing that. So now if I go into my Zotero and find the doctoro, and drag over the adversarial interoperability article, you'll see that, and click away, you'll see that the Corey doctoro now got its attribute got automatically added and parsed. Now, that's kind of how you do it. Now, one thing to be thinking about, though, is that rule is, and it's happening so fast you don't see it, but because it's a rule, that information, you see this little blinking right here. So this note's being constantly updated, and this attribute value is being constantly populated every time this rule is running, because of the that RAS information is there. So a person, and that's creating unnecessary CPU processes and updates to a displayed attribute that you don't need, which could, in the form of larger files, really slow things down. So if I were to do this, I would say this: if reference RAS does not equal blank, then you do this. And then I would clear out the reference RAF, and I would make sure that before I did this, I would make sure all of the information in that reference RAS is extracted and captured. And then once you've kind of perfected your method and your stamp to do it, I would do it that way. So then that way, when Tinderbox is running, it's only checking that one Boolean, or you could just turn off the rule for the reference too, would be another example. But then that way, by doing that, you're clearing that out. But and I didn't get the citation. Oh, and I didn't get the citation clean. So that gives you the idea on how to do that. So let's go back to our other experiment then. So Frederick, that was a long-winded explanation, but was that helpful in any way?
Oh, definitely, definitely. And it pulls together some other thoughts you've shared before. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, now let's play with this attribution thing. Okay, this is kind of fun, and I do because I work alone all the time, you know, and sometimes you just need an affirmation, and if no one else is going to give it to yourself. That's kind of how all of this came up for me. And let me so we can do it quickly. Let me pull up another Tinderbox file so I can copy code back and forth here. Here. Yeah, there it is. All right. So what we're going to do.
I am grateful. Everything is always working out for me.
Okay. There's an example of an affirmation because I just opened up one of my files and I have this one file every time you'll see some automation that happens from it. So
take that woman up behind the barn and shoot her.
So let's go ahead and start with this. So let's use the I am grateful affirmation that we just got from the software. Okay, so here is a note with its name and text, and you can have that same thing in text as well. And again, this is a nice way, and the methods of doing this too, especially when you're getting started, is, and this is something the marks have taught me over the years, is break the software into its pieces. And again, oddly enough, this goes back to the discussion that David Eddy kicked off for us at the very beginning of today's call, is how you go about organizing the software, how you go about learning the software, doing what's called recursive programming. It's all about getting things into these kind of atomic chunks to be able to leverage and reuse as you go through the process. So what we can do here is we create a, I was going to do a stamp. So go to the stamp, and Tinderbox has a speak. Tinderbox has a speak operator, which is using the speaking tool on the back of Tinderbox. So if we simply say speak $name, right? And you're going to feed the string name into the operator speak.
I am grateful.
And you get that that information. And then if you wanted to modify it a little bit, we could say first name, create an attribute, and we'll grab we'll grab Frederick's name. And so then we can modify our variable string be first name equals first name. And then we can add that, and then we can say variable string.
You have a typo on string.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm too small on my screen here. Thing is, Tinderbox is pretty forgiving, so that would probably wouldn't have been all right. We'll call it v string equals first name plus space plus $name. And then we replace that with this. So essentially now what we've done, and again, this is a great example of kind of contextualizing and variabilizing your action code as well. So now we've said first name is first name Frederick. Second name is the string that we want to, or the attribution that we want to be triggering, which is the first name plus a space. And if we wanted to, I think grammar actually helps with the rhetoric, so we can put it in the language there, and then we have to apply. Just a minute. It's a semicolon, not a colon. And I just deleted the. There we go.
Frederick, I am grateful.
Okay. And what you're doing is you're just taking the various elements of data, stringing them together, and then passing them to the operator to perform a function. And in this function, the operator is to speak. Okay. Now, one thing that's fun with this process and doing this is the Mac inherently has a bunch of voices. And I always forget where they are. I think they're in accessibility. Yeah, voice, live to speech. Where are the voices? System, Samantha. Yeah, all right, here it is. So you can, let me do a quick search. I don't remember how to download new voices, and I'll take, let me pull that up really quick. I don't need to. Just ask you chat here real quick. So Mac comes with just tons and tons of voices. It says spoken content. So we go to accessibility. Spoken content. System voice. I was right. I got it here. Well, I don't want to waste our time right now, but you can look it up. Click down. Browse available voices. There's somewhere in here there is a all right, I won't waste our time, but somewhere in here there's a button that allows you to actually select and download different voices, so that we can get like Eddie Eloquence. So if I change my voice that way, I can go here.
Frederick, I am grateful.
Right, and I can go down and pick another one.
Frederick, I am grateful.
And then I'll just go back to, and for some reason I like. Here's Karen.
There's a manage voices.
I am grateful.
Well, I'm sorry.
Voice selector, the very last item way down the bottom, there's a manage voices.
Is there?
The dialogue.
Where is it? I don't see it.
Oh, let me see where it is on mine.
Yeah. Okay. If you can help us point it out, that would be helpful. But you'll see that I'm doing that, and this is actually another great teaching moment for ATB Ref.
Okay. You want the voice in parentheses live speech control panel. Then if you look at the voice item there, you go down to the very bottom of the pop-up menu, and then you'll get manage voices as the last item.
All right. So look at the screen. Tell me where I would go to do that.
Okay, you're on spoken content. You need to be on voice live speech.
Voice live speech. Where is that?
Do a search on voice, and then you should see voice live speech. Yeah, VOI will be enough to bring it up. VOI. Okay, now live speech is the one you want to select.
There it is.
Okay, now go to voice. Now the one down, use system voice, select that, then down the very bottom, manage voices.
Yeah, there it is. Okay, so if you come here you can go through this list and you can download the different voices to your computer. And so if you like a different voice, and a whole bunch of different languages too.
Ονομάζομαι Μελίνα. Μιλάω ελληνικά.
So you can do it in all the different languages, and you can get all the different.
Hello, my name is Nathan. I am an American English voice.
Right, and then it has different versions. You have the general wise, and then you have the enhanced one, which is a larger file, but it has a lot more fidelity.
Hello, my name is Nathan. I am an American English voice.
Right, so I'll just go ahead and do it because I've got a huge hard drive. So if I've gone now downloaded Nathan Enhanced, now let me show you here as an example. Oops. So if you go to ATB Ref and we search on Speak, and you'll see here, Speak. So Speak actually lets you pass the another thing you can do with Speak, if you want, is to pass the name parameter. And actually, it seems like I was doing it backwards. Actually, let's fix that. So Tinderbox was responding both. So what Speak really wants is vstring dot speak. And now I can say Nathan Enhanced. Is this going to work?
Frederick, I am grateful.
No.
No, take out the enhanced.
Yeah, take out the enhanced.
Frederick, I am grateful.
Right. So this is a way now. So we're passing the string. This is the right syntax. And that's why having ATB Ref is awesome. And why also Tinderbox is so forgiving. So even though I did it wrong, it knew my intention and it was working. But then when I read ATB Ref, I needed to pass the parameters back to Tinderbox properly. So it's pass the string, call the operator, and then give it its name. And if you don't give it a name, it will default to its proper
System. And they're both perfectly good syntaxes, both the dot notation and the operator notation.
Got it. Okay, so that was just maybe an ATB Ref.
Frederick, I am grateful.
So then what you can do here too, which is super fun, is you then can start building out libraries for your file. So if I go and we're in outline view now, so what I've done is I've created create a note, and we'll say voices, and we'll just do a cut Samantha and Nathan. Right, so you can have a list of voices, and then I created an attribute called voice. And then we add a rule, and this is going to be a set or a string. And then what I did when I was playing with this, I went to rule and I say voice equals, and I don't look it up real quick so we don't have to fumble around. Random. Okay, yeah, that's what I was looking for. Random child. So voice equals name. My fingers are all over the place.
Open paren.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So now if I go back here and apply it, run the rule. All right. So now I've got my voice. My voice is going to grab whatever random child I have. So what I've done is I've downloaded tons, and maybe I'm not on this machine. So so I've downloaded all of these different ones that I can go in. There's Samantha, grabbing Samantha Enhanced while we're at it. Susan, grab Susan Enhanced. So I can go out down here and grab Susan, add her in. And so now the system's automatically going to be getting those voices. So now I can go back here and I'm going to make variable string the voice equals voice from the note voices over. And I'm going to have to change this up here, and we'll call this voices folder just so we don't have any conflicts down the road. So now by doing that, got a random voice.
Frederick, I am grateful.
Okay, so now I've set up the system so every time it spits out a voice, I'm going to get a random voice rather than just the same old voice every time. And I find that fun. Similarly, what you can do is you can create affirmations. And let me go grab a bunch so I'm not copying them here. And by the way, we'll go ahead and just do this. Where's my affirmations? There it is.
Wow.
So I'll just randomly grab a bunch.
Operating system version. So I told him.
So here's a bunch of affirmations that I've grabbed. We can do something similar. Affirmation. Create the string. Go here, grab that. Go here, paste that in. So now we're going to have Tinderbox randomly grab an affirmation. And then we can come up here and we can say note. So now we're going to call the stamp on just a random note while we're doing this. We modify this. We say variable string equals affirmation. Folder. Okay. Now if we do it.
Note.
All right. Oh, and we don't want to be passing the name. I'm sorry. It's up here. Oh, sorry. Got it. No. Move this one down here. And rather than passing it name, we're now going to pass it via affirmation.
My contributions add value to the world.
Okay. And now if we adjust the space in the note and do it again.
Universe prayer.
Okay. So, and then step back, do it again.
Universe prayer.
Okay. I don't like that one.
My contributions add value to the world.
Okay. And so now we can have it be, and the randomness will happen. And then what you can do, let me find my timer on my note, and then we can wrap up today. I just got to see where did I do that? I think I did it in a stamp hints. Is it stamps? I'm looking at another file while I'm doing this. Here we go. Okay, got it. And then where was I doing that? So I created a this is what I did. I'm haven't looked at this in ages, so all right, I'll copy this over into this new file and we'll share it on the. So now, and this is how you can then get a little bit more complex, and I'll finish this up for everybody later. But if we had built-in hints, and we drop this in the library. So I've got this function that I built. And then I will grab the stamp too. Come on. Oops. Sorry, my computer's going wonky here. It's my mouse. All right. And then I've got a stamp I created as well. And we won't have time for me to finish this demo for everybody. But I created at another point an attribute called date affirmation. And I said date equals now plus, now minus 1 hour. And then I have a function called affirmation ID. And then that runs this function. And so what this essentially then does is generates a randomized clock so that the tool is giving me an affirmation at some random period of time every hour. And that's what this little affirmation, and I'll finish this before I publish it and so we can share it with everybody. But then, so this affirmation methodology then would allow you to be able to have Tinderbox speak to you and give you an affirmation and tell you how wonderful you're doing, or give you reminders like stop and breathe, while you're doing your work. And with that, we're about 10:32. Anybody thoughts, comments, questions? Did you find this valuable?
Great session.
All right. Appreciate it. Okay, everybody. We'll see you next week. I'll finish this up and drop it up on the forum.
Thank you. That's great.
Yep.
Thank you.